you know who made it.
Hello and welcome to the See Me Be Me podcast. On today's episode, we are joined by Dennis Logan, who is the founder and CEO of Endelea Studios. Welcome to the podcast, Dennis.
Thank you, Now. Thank you, Blair. Like I said, a huge fan from you guys well before the podcast, and truly appreciate the message you guys are setting out to the world here. Like I said, huge fan for years now. So honestly, a little bit starstruck.
Thank you, man. Thank you, man. And Dennis is joining us from the USA. Whereabouts in the USA, Dennis?
So based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. So good old motor racing home, at least for the U.S. Hometown there. And born and raised Pittsburgh though, so bit of a Midwesterner, Southwest, Yinzer, bit of everything.
And so tell us, Dennis, what is Endelea Studios and how did you start it?
Sure. So Endelea Studio on the surface is a website design and development company. So really trying to focus in on those founders that are between whether operationalizing an idea to you have a small side hustle going and it could grow a lot faster with a proper digital presence. It really came about because of, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more, but I spent about 12 years in insurance and then 2 years consulting for private equity firms. And frankly, between all those jobs, I was looking at, call it 20 to 50 websites per day of looking for leads to call, looking for relationships to build, et cetera. And frankly, a lot of them, even this is, pre-pandemic, were 5, 10, 20 years old and just didn't really give you much information. And then in starting my own insurance agency, I saw firsthand how, let's call it the quality of what you invest in can vary so much with website design, marketing teams, et cetera, where you can spend your entire savings before you even get a single lead. And no one really tells you how to do that. They're all willing to take that dollar first. So our goal is really to be an agnostic advisor throughout that entire process. So really being a true advisor to the founder, saying, hey, look, you have an idea, you have a side hustle. This is a great next step for you. This is where you should go. So website happens to be that first step that a lot of people just don't really have set up. So we look at it as kind of like we're managing your store, right? So if you were back in the day, you build a brick and mortar, you would have a store manager that just at least cleans up things, puts out the holiday decorations, make sure the customers are getting through to where they need to get through. And that's what a lot of people don't have right now. They're trying to, post a website. It says a simple bio, and then all of a sudden they're wondering why there's not more traction. There's not more actual acquisition by the client. They're just kind of clicking on it, what have you. And so that's what we're there to provide that throughput of the transaction, pretty much.
And in terms of your experience, because reading, learning more about you, you've worked on both sides. You've worked with VC firms, or you've worked within a VC firm, and now you've got your own company where you're working with ambitious founders and partnering up with VC firms. So in terms of your experience then, what is the appetite for VC firms to invest in, diverse businesses, whether it's, Black businesses, Asian businesses, female founded businesses? Do you see that changing? Are they more pro investing in those businesses, or is it still the same?
I would say it's definitely progressing in the right direction of they're investing in more. I would say there's companies like 776 Management, for instance. That was started by Serena Williams and her husband, who launched Reddit. So you have major funds that are now, part of the infrastructure that are truly looking out for Black and brown businesses, minority-owned businesses, female-owned businesses. And so you have that landscape changing to make other, and this is me speaking candidly here, the private equity VC market is a very they have a mind share. So no one's really trying to do something super cutting edge unless you're a true disruptor, and then you might get squashed out by the big bucks, so to speak. So a lot of it is kind of like, okay, well, this company did well. Okay, we'll copy that then. So 776 is kind of one of those companies that's kind of saying, hey, look, this is our focus. And there's been other companies, not to overlook them, right? But that's just kind of a big name that, you can imagine the amount of money that's going to always come through those doors with those kind of names behind it, so to speak. In regards to, I would say, the true creativity of the investments, though, I would say is still kind of lacking. So I still see a lot of And this is, again, my personal opinion, and looking at due diligence deals for the last 2 years, probably like close to 100 over 100 of them actually.
Yeah.
It's still a lot of generic kind of businesses, so to speak, where it's like an HVAC contractor, a law firm, those areas that have been proven already. So therefore, they're not really taking a quote unquote risk by investing in a black or brown company. If that makes sense. Versus what you guys have and what I would love to support, like I said, where we're saying, hey, look, this is a brand new idea. This doesn't exist somewhere else. You can't say that we've tried this before, that we didn't try this before. This is a brand new idea that we're bringing to the light. So that's where we try to step in and say, hey, look, this is the path you might want to follow. If you were just a standard law firm, then it's this path, but you can't follow that same path and expect the same results, right?
Yeah. I wanted to ask her, Dennis, in terms of you getting started on your, let's say, your entrepreneurial journey, did you have almost like a mentor or a role model to help get you started on that journey and pave the way for you?
I would say yes and no. So I would say my sisters. My sisters are 11 and 13 years older than me, so they're absolutely my role models. I just don't know if that not direct to your question of like the person, outside the family, so to speak. But so my oldest sister worked for Deloitte for about 15, 17 years, something like that, as a management consultant. And so she got to see just constant deals, constant flow of the Fortune 500 companies to acquisition of other companies. And so I got to see firsthand what her day-to-day looked like. So that was a great experience to say like, oh, look, that she's, working from the couch as she does her reports, even though the report may be tedious and taxing, but I like the fact that she got to work from the couch, right? So in contrast to my other sister, who's a pediatrician and wanted to be a pediatrician since she was a kid, I just knew that I as many of us took Bio 205 or the weed out class. I'm not sure what you guys have over there, was it chemistry or physics or whatever. I was weeded out. That was not my strong suit by any means. STEM, I guess, would probably be a considered weak point in my GPA, although it's also always been my biggest interest. So to me, it was a matter of like the content not matching the, what I want to study, so to speak. But as far as mentors, like I said, it was really those two, along with my two older cousins. So I have a oldest cousin that both of them played professional football. And so they taught me tenacity. They taught me how to, work hard, take your hits, learn how to not take your hits, and keep pushing. So that's really what pushed me into sales and kind of being an entrepreneur, because it was like, every time I got kind of pushed back in the corporate world, I was like, okay, what's the next step? I'm not just going to give up. I'm not just going to be reduced to this spot. How do I, do a little juke move and get around this guy next time? And that's kind of where the entrepreneurial spirit came from, frankly.
Dennis, there's many different transitions within your career. So you mentioned there was many different diverse roles, such as like internships, and then there's insurance before you ended up being the founder of Endelea Studio. So what inspired these different transitions?
As I was going through those moments, it was kind of feeling like I hit a ceiling. Really feeling like no matter, again, we'll take it back to sports analogies, right? Like no matter whether I ran 100 miles a week or whether I ran 10 miles a week, I was still getting the exact same time out. And that will drive anyone crazy, right? Like no matter if you want to at least see like up or down, figure out which way is the right direction at least. And I just really felt like I was just, no matter kind of what I did, I was still kind of getting that same kind of secondary spot as far as, getting opportunities to go out and market to clients, and therefore, build my own brand, build my own name, those kind of things. And then in hindsight, every company that I worked for actually went through some kind of acquisition. And so there's a matter of, and I'll say, especially pre-pandemic, no one really cared about technology. Everyone cared about kind of the basis of the business, how much revenue do you bring in, that kind of thing. So most people would not invest in technology at all. So us, the underwriters, would have to spend 2 to 3 hours on a quote that should only take 10 minutes if you had the proper technology, but then still also getting, barked at because we're not writing enough business quickly enough because it's taking us 2 to 3 hours per quote, right? So those are the kind of things that you see. Okay, again, I look at the small signs. Maybe it comes from my psychology background. Whenever a company starts giving away a lot of gifts, there's usually kind of a reason for that. And so a lot of the companies started giving away a lot of swag and a lot of like, kind of closet cleaning kind of things. And it's just like, oh, all right, there's three check boxes of like, hey, you're about to sell. It's like, okay, one box is checked. Okay, second box is checked. Okay, you start aligning your own affairs because no one else is going to do it for you. So that's really in hindsight, like I said, every company I worked for either went through acquisition or merger within the first 6 months, or went through one, within about 6 months after I left. And I've seen firsthand on both sides of that where, again, not to say people lie, but people are often misinformed, and especially middle management, in my opinion, are kind of kept in the shadows to say what's supposedly true, whatever. But there's been conversations on a Monday that says, hey, look, your job's safe. You're going to have a job for the next month, even with your kids and your wife and, blah, 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 blah. And then next week they're gone, right? Like they just cut the whole division gone. And that's not to say that, like I said, the person lied to them or whatever, what have you, but that's the conversations that do happen. And for me, I'm like the old route of, okay, well, where's the most stable income? And, to the point of, like I said, my dad worked for the city for 40 years. Where's that stability? Is like, okay, well, that just doesn't, to me, it doesn't exist right now. Like, unless I build my own, that doesn't exist to me, because at least I can control something. You can't control the market, you can't control everything, but at least you can I can control my hustle, right? Like I can at least continuously put out my hustle, and something will come back at least, right? So sorry, I forget the original question there, but I hope that answered.
It's just regarding like what essentially inspired your different like transitions in your career, just like with internships and insurance, really. But that's it's really interesting. Thanks for that, Dennis.
Absolutely.
Again, going to you as an entrepreneur, what would you say are 3 skills that you picked up on your journey that's helped to make you as successful as you are today? If you have to name 3.
So on the journey, including like from birth or like from the last 10 years?
Oh, well, let's say, last 10 years, so we say.
Last 10 years? All right. Because I was saying, so always been detail oriented. My dad was a homicide detective, so he's honed that into me. So I think that's always been just a natural gift of mine to be, the whole picture has to make sense. And as soon as there's like that one thing off, I have to hone in. I have to dig out. I have to, figure out what that is. In the last 10 years, self-organization is not taught, nor does anyone really, in my experience, really help you to do that. So figuring out how to really organize yourself in my experience, like I said, going from a sports mentality to, I ran track and did every sport under the sun from 5 years old until in college, even a couple years after college. And so going from that structure where, you have to be up at 5 a.m. to do your runs, you have to be at the 4 p.m. lift, you have to get all your schoolwork in between those 2 times. So there's not really time to what they call self-organize or what have you, versus post-grad, all of a sudden you're technically done at 5. What else do you do at that time? And how do you start to build? And so, especially going into an entrepreneur role, you have 24 hours a day, right? Like me personally, I work sometimes from 2 a.m. till about 10 a.m, and that's just because I like the quiet at that time, so to speak. So self-organization, I say, is one of the biggest things. Being bold enough to, really being vulnerable enough to put yourself out there, because it's a lot different than selling someone else's product. That's one of the things that I think is overwhelming to a lot of entrepreneurs when they first start out. It's they see the market, they see the niche, they see the fit for something, and then they go, okay, well, it's time to put it out there. Oh, I don't know if this person might not like that. This person is going to say this and that, and it's like you've got to figure out how to either continue to work on your product to the point that you feel comfortable with it, or be bold enough to fail and say, okay, this is where we are. This is version 1. This is going out. Let's see what happens. And it's a question you have to ask yourself. Third thing is really, I would say, patience as an entrepreneur. It's a different skill than any other role that I've ever had. Like I said, in track, you can go out and run a little bit more. You can go do some more push-ups. You can kind of do things to move the needle in a way that you know the needle has to move. Versus sometimes, I'm not sure if you guys are religious, but it's like waiting for the Red Sea. If you go into the Red Sea too early, God didn't part it yet. If you go in too late, it's already closed. So sometimes entrepreneurs just like waiting for it to split for a second, just because that's the right time for you. And so, as I progressed this, so I actually started an insurance agency, like I said, about 3 years ago, and that's coming to more additional flourishing at the same time, where the relationships that I built and made sure that I didn't burn by being that kind of greedy salesman saying, yeah, I need your business, I need to fear monger you to get this business. Now to come back saying hey, I just want you to take a look. It's the last time you pointed me in the right direction. I appreciate that, those kind of things. So building that kind of patience to see those businesses come back at 10 times the revenue they were at before. So now it's a bigger, insurance commission check, those kind of things. So being patient is it's hard, but it definitely pays off.
I can echo that. Being patient. It's all about being patient, waiting for the right opportunity, and not jumping to the gun or not waiting too late. In terms of diversity, inclusion, and equity, what does that mean to you?
And it's a way of life to me. Yeah, I mean, without diversity, you're missing part of the puzzle. You're missing major pieces of the puzzle. For me, it's also like on a deeper level. I'm not sure if you guys have Cutco and Avon products, Cutco knives,
Yeah.
Avon pharmaceuticals. I'm not sure if it's the same over there, but everyone of African American descent over here has an aunt, a cousin, someone that sold one of those products, or if not both. So for me, it was my sister. I have cousins that sold them. And to the point of DEI, if you even look at Avon's biography book, a great read for founders, like I said, looking at a company that started back in the 1800s, but basically they never marketed the sales reps roles to Black women, even to 2010, 2015, right? Like even to that day, they still were not truly targeting that market. They were like, okay, well, there's this neighborhood next to this white neighborhood, so I guess we'll go ahead and let them sell as well, what have you. And so you just see this continuous cycle of kind of waiting for Black women to be last pick. And so that's where this idea really came from, was that I have a 17-year-old niece who's my best friend, honestly, but also just a very bright young girl who's obviously going to college. But as I sit here and tell her about, roles that she should look at, or, as I think through what she should learn through an internship, what she should learn through her first kind of for a few years out of college, I didn't really have a good place for her to pick, right? Like I knew some areas, and a few of my friends are now managers, and so they could potentially, show her the ropes or what have you. But I didn't see a route that was very clear of saying, hey, look, no matter if you come and work for us in 2 years, you're going to have at least enough basis to go work somewhere else. That's the bottom line, right? Yeah. On top of that, we're going to make you some money because website design is a ripe market right now. So those are our two things that, like I said, where that's my focus is Black women, but I also want to bring on a team that's, like I said, we are diversity inclusive. Like I said, I have best friends and family members that are white, et cetera, et cetera. So we're never to be exclusive, but really just to say, hey, look, for the last at least 50, 60 years, Black women have been getting less than the backseat. They're being told to essentially walk behind the car. And to me, that's just not fair, not right, et cetera. And so once I see something, I got to do something about it. And so Endelea is really a response to that, and in response to the DEI world of seeing, again, to the last point here is that when you had 2016, 2017, in the huge rush, right? Everyone suddenly found the Black female CEO, CFO, et cetera. And it's like, well, they've been here. They've had the resume has been the same pretty much. And You said no 5 times already, but now suddenly, because your investors are, and that's where I started seeing the PE VCs mark, where that became, again, a group think tactic of, okay, let's just not get sued. It's not, it's not, and I'm not trying to discredit VC and PE firms, right? But not a lot of them were saying, okay, DEI is our top priority. It was DEI is our top threat. We might get sued because our entire board and all of our employees are white males. And it's like, well, we could have told you that like 5 years ago, but all right, like, yes, you should probably get some diversity. And so I think there's, to your point, or original question earlier in the podcast, there's an awakeness to the positivities of DEI, and they're finally seeing the creativity that we bring to the table. And it's hard to deny that once you see, 5x revenue over year, what have you. But like I said, it's still, we're still in the system. Systems take time to change, right? So.
No, absolutely. I echo everything that you just said, and it was in a McKinsey report a couple of years ago. Like
Yep.
but the benefits of having a more diverse workforce, or even diversity at a board level, because people bring ideas or things from different backgrounds, whether it is ideas, creativity, productivity, different ways of problem solving, which the more the merrier. It boosts productivity, boosts revenues, and can even take a small medium business international. So yeah, there's many perks of it. So it seems crazy not to do it, but I suppose it's if you've been doing something for so long, it's the fear and resistance to change. And sometimes it's like, well, if it's working well, why do I need to change? But sometimes change is for the best. And speaking of that, you've changed and developed over the years in terms of your career paths and your learning. But if you had to speak, let's say 15 years ago, speak to your high school self. If you could give your high school self any advice, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Focus on your path. And once you see your path, focus on it.
Yeah.
I would say one of the books I recommend to pretty much everyone is Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. It really talks about a founder's journey through, starting as a side hustle, starting with some loans, starting out just kind of not knowing obviously how big Nike could be. Really, and he just talks about how his route is singularly focused, and how no matter where he kind of went, he sees shoes and feet, and that's just kind of the thing he sees. And so for me, I personally see the world through shoes. And so my high school self was working at the Whitaker Group, actually. So social status clothing retailer out of Pittsburgh. And so that's what frankly taught me my basis of sales, business, etc. was frankly, there's a million shoes, right? How do you sell shoes? You have to make someone want what is about that shoe differently than anything else. And so even though it's still rubber, nylon, shoelace, there's still the same three elements, but they're done differently. There's a reason, whether it's a story behind it, whether it's the extra cushioning, there's an extra detail that goes into that. And so for me, I always looked at everything as like, okay, well, what do you boil it down to? What are the key things? And so that comparative has always helped me with navigating a lot of life's obstacles, especially in corporate world. So I would say, to the person that sees life through shoes or sees life through rubber bands or engines or whatever else, like continue to hone in on that, because whatever you learn probably will transfer over to other things that you will learn. Like I said, it's not going to make a lot of sense at first sometimes, but sometimes you just gotta go, all right, this, for me, like I said, insurance policies are 100 pages long easily, and sitting there trying to actually dissect each one to figure out what is which would have just drove me crazy. But I broke it down to, all right, this is a shoe. This one's a basketball shoe. This one's a track shoe. This one's a tennis shoe. And this is the person that's going to probably want this. And so that for me, again, just really broke it down. And so I would say, again, focus on that path.
You know who made it.
Well, Dennis, thank you so much for being a guest on CVBB podcast. And yet, definitely we'll have to get you back on the podcast and do an update journey of where things are with Endelea.
Yeah, please. Awesome, guys. Like I said, thank you for your time. Thank you for the platform here. Like I said, I'll definitely have a lot of referrals for you. So keep a lookout for my email.